Well, hello and welcome, everyone. Hope you had a great keynote session here at DemoFest. We're so excited to have you here. Thank you for joining us from House of Brands to Branded House with Samantha Jankowicz. My name is Alex Edwards. I'm the Vice President of Client Success here at Consensus, and I will be your moderator for today. Now, DemoFest is presented by Consensus. It transforms how you sell with Consensus, the first product experience platform. You can automate demos, drive faster decisions, and accelerate growth. You can learn more at goconsensus.com or click Watch a Demo at the top of your screen. We encourage you to participate in today's session. You can find a few different ways to engage with us on the right side of the console. The chat function will allow you to connect with us as well as other attendees. You can find some helpful resources in the Docs tab. And lastly, your speaker will answer any questions throughout today's session. So please take advantage of the Q&A box and drop in any questions that you have on mind. Now, if at any time you have any technical difficulties, head to the gear at the bottom of your screen. This is where you'll see the help document to troubleshoot common issues. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Samantha Jankowicz. Samantha is the Director of Value Management at H1, where she also supports enablement, pre-sales, and go-to-market strategies. Over the past year, she has worked closely with the commercial team to enhance their client conversations and drive success. Before joining H1, Samantha spent over 5 years in health tech, focusing on client services, account management, and value creation. Her career began in hospital management, where she developed a strong foundation in healthcare operations. Samantha is based in New York City, a proud University of Pittsburgh alumna, and spends her free time exploring local coffee shops. And so with that, Samantha, I will turn the time over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the great introduction and for Consensus for putting on this event. I'll go ahead and share my screen and then we dive right into it. The introduction kind of speaks for itself, and the coffee here is from a local coffee shop this morning. Couldn't do it without the great coffee of Manhattan. Wanted to kind of give a little bit of background about who H1 is today, just so you can understand who we are, since we're not, say, enablement based per se, but then so that our case study as we go through it makes a little bit more sense. At H1, our mission is to connect the world to the right doctors. And we do that by equipping pharma, CROs, digital health companies, and health plans with the materials they need, whether that's data or software solutions, to help them reach their goals. So while we're not enablement in platform, we did recently lead a cross-functional initiative that gave us really great insight into how enablement can drive alignment towards major brand and product shifts. Throughout this enablement effort, we helped ensure that our pre-sales and our commercial teams were equipped to tell a single unified story. This was anchored in updated messaging, new product packaging, and a refreshed go-to-market strategy. So today, we'll talk through our specific case study and how we supported the transition, but we'll also give you tactical steps to review as you maybe go through a strategic brand decision of your own, making sure that all of your users are confident in their field execution. So to kick off today's session, here's a quick look at how we'll break that down. First, we'll start with the strategic end, defining the difference between a house of brands and a branded house using some logos that you're probably all familiar with. And then we'll talk through how those two architectures carry very different implications, whether that's for product strategy, marketing, sales alignment, or more. And then from there, we'll look into examples of these benefits, what drives companies to shift as we did, and kind of go through our thinking on that. But then from there, we'll get into the tactical end of this, how enablement can be used as a lever to support this shift. We'll talk through our examples as a case study in how we approached it, whether that be training or messaging alignment, content updates, or certification, to ensure that our entire commercial team was equipped to tell this rebranding story, to communicate the new messaging, and to realign our offerings. So by the end of today, you'll have a full playbook on how to operationalize these shifts within your organization, from the strategic alignment all the way through field execution. So let's dive in and talk about a house of brands and how it compares to a branded house. When we talk about brand architecture, we're really talking about how companies organize and present their products and their services to the market as a whole. Generally, companies fall into one of these two buckets. This slide gives us a high-level overview of the two primary groups. On the left-hand side, we have a house of brand strategy. This is typically when a company wants to target very different audiences, manage multiple product categories, and maintain distinct identities for each of their offerings. The benefits here is that it allows for flexibility, it supports risk containment, and it allows for tailored marketing, which can also lead down the line to fragmented marketing and less efficiency in your go-to-market because they're all unique and identified. Then from there, on a branded house side, this leads into one strong unified brand. Every product or service carries this master brand, reinforcing trust, recognition, and clarity to the market. This is often used when companies want to present as a cohesive platform across all of their offerings, meaning that they can simplify their messaging and create cross-product synergies. But with this, some of the downsides are that it's harder to pivot and it's more difficult to target niche segments. We'll dive into examples of both in the next two slides, looking at Unilever and Apple as examples, and their strategic decisions around their brand strategy for goals, audiences, and growth plans. So Unilever themselves is a textbook definition of a house of brands. What you're seeing on this slide is just a fraction of their 400 plus brands that they manage globally. From Dove to Ben & Jerry's, Axe to Hellmann's, each of these companies has their own identity and their own customer base. That means in many senses, they also have their own sales and marketing teams. So why does Unilever use this model? It's because they want to target very different audiences across the different categories with messaging and positioning that's totally unique to each given product. The person buying Dove is likely not the same day customer as someone buying Skippy, nor does Unilever expect them to be. So those messages need to be distinct and different. And the benefit here is flexibility. If one brand stumbles, the others aren't impacted. They can launch, sunset, reposition brands all independent of one another. But that also has a trade-off in complexity. You're managing dozens, if not hundreds of brands, meaning internal coordination is much more challenging, and you have less leverage from a unified brand identity. So on the other hand, you have a branded house. In action, Apple's probably one of the best examples because it's part of most people's everyday. Apple uses a single dominant brand to create trust, consistency, and recognition across every single product they offer, whether it's an Apple Watch or Apple TV Plus, Apple Music, or Apple News. The brand identity starts with Apple in the name, and that name carries a lot of weight through each launch as well. This strategy works well for Apple because they're targeting a unified customer base. These people value design, integration, and a premium experience. This also means it simplifies marketing. This allows them to reduce confusion, and it makes it easier to cross-promote. For example, bundling Apple One as a unit allows you to package multiple services all together. But the downside here is if something goes wrong with one of your products, it can impact the entire reputation of the brand. For Apple, though, they weighed those costs and risks, and the benefit of a seamless ecosystem outweighed the risk. Now, as we take these two into account, it's also important to note that companies don't just pick a strategy and stick with it over time. You see many evolving depending on their growth, market challenges, or business priorities, and companies can go in either direction. So for today's conversation, let's start with a company that's moving from a house of brands to a branded house. Coca-Cola and Adobe are perfect examples of this shift. Coca-Cola once heavily emphasized individual products, Diet Coke, Coke Zero, Classic Coke, with distinct branding. But over the last decade, it's moved to a singular one brand strategy, where all variants now sit under the unified Coca-Cola master brand. This gives it stronger brand equity, consistency, and makes marketing more efficient globally, which was a goal for Coca-Cola. In a similar vein, Adobe made a similar shift. In the past, it used to promote different products, call it Photoshop, Illustrator, or InDesign, as standalone offerings. But now they've shifted to Adobe Creative Cloud, creating this cohesive brand suite for all products, making it easier to cross-sell and emphasize the integrated value of the platform as a whole. This direction supports unified messaging, stronger brand equity, and a simplified customer experience. Now, as we look at other transitions, we have the contrary, a branded house to a house of brands. Companies like Sony and GE have moved in this direction over time. Take Sony. They started as a branded house, Sony TV, Sony Music, Sony PlayStation. But these business lines, as they matured, became more specialized, and they started to almost operate as these distinct brands, especially in industries like gaming and entertainment, where that unique identity really mattered most. In a similar vein, GE also recently spun off its business units, some of its business units entirely, healthcare, aviation, and energy, just to name a few. Each of these now sit with their own leadership, their own branding, and their own growth strategy for moving forward. This move towards a house of brands model allows for risk containment, more tailored go-to-marketing strategies, and focused innovation within each of the segments. The key takeaway here is that brand architecture isn't static. It should serve the broader strategy, whether it's unifying or decentralizing. The goal is to support your organization's growth, clarity, and customer alignment. So that's really what we took into account as we were moving through this exercise. Now that we've explored the overall architecture more broadly, let's use the case study of our organization as to how we approached this challenge and evolved our pre-sales positioning. This timeline here shows you how H1 grew over the last several years, not just in size, but in the complexity in who we were serving and what we were offering. We realized that our brand structure no longer really reflected how we currently operated. We weren't just a set of disconnected offerings. We had become a true platform spanning the different areas of pharma, medical, clinical, and commercial users. And we shared data and insights, which meant we had growing expectations for a unified experience with our customer base. So our shift towards a branded house strategy wasn't just a marketing decision. It was strategically necessary for us to grow, to simplify our story across our teams and audiences, strengthen our trust in our company as a platform, not just a product, and support our future growth by presenting a clear, cohesive strategy, which incorporated our roadmap overall. And this shift was really key at this given time. It mattered then. We had outgrown our one product brand that we started with back in 2017. As we moved to a unified brand, it set us up to scale with clarity and confidence that our team needed to go to market with. And in doing so, they were able to lean on this messaging and our roadmap to highlight the plans that we had for product and our data assets as we grew as an organization. So we looked at our internal structure and the way we talked about our products requiring alignment and the growth we were having, which led to a major cross-functional initiative to reclassify how we position and operationalize our portfolio. This project was an extensive 5-month product involving a wide range of teams, everyone from commercial to commercial strategy to marketing, sales ops, finance, product, and more were all involved in different work streams for this project. And for us, this wasn't just a naming exercise. This was a true and deep review of our product alignment and restructuring of how we packaged and presented our offering to different personas within our segment. Our main goal here was to shift from a feature-led strategy to a persona-led strategy. This meant we weren't selling isolated capabilities, but rather we needed to show and communicate how each part of our platform supported the different needs of the different customer groups we work with on a daily basis. And the outcome from this is we went from 2 branded products to a structured suite of solutions, which you see on the right-hand side, my apologies, with clearly mapped audiences: clinical, medical, commercial, and then health plans and digital health. This structure now drives everything that we'll talk about today and more. From how we build our decks on an enablement front, to how we train and support our teams, to how we go to market, everything falls within these buckets. And this set the foundation for us for the branded house enablement strategy, which we'll walk through in detail next. Now that we had the right structure in place for our taxonomy realignment, the next step was the enablement, making sure our commercial team was ready to bring this to market with confidence. So this next section, we'll talk through how we equipped the team, the steps we took through enablement, content updates, and certification to ensure that everyone is aligned on our positioning and confident to communicate this in the market. So once the taxonomy was finalized through that project, the enablement team fully shifted focus to preparing our commercial team for launch. And that was really meaning we had to get intentional in how we enabled our team and supported them. We broke down our core priorities into 6 different buckets, each representing a building block to ensure that our sales team, pre-sales team, and commercial teams could confidently deliver the new story, positioning, and pricing. So step number 1 for us was to update all of our sales collateral, decks, and messaging. Then from there, we needed to focus on a cultural alignment. This whole initiative wasn't just a new slide being added. This was truly a new formation in how we communicated about our organization. And with that, we had to ensure that everyone was on board. So we partnered closely with the commercial team to do so, not just from the top down, but also from the bottom up. Additionally, we trained the team on the new product alignment. We ensured every rep understood how the offerings map to the personas and not just the features to allow them to value sell in a really strong and meaningful way. Then from there, we looped in pricing with that as well. We wanted to ensure that we partnered with sales ops and the field to introduce these new SKUs from a pricing standpoint to ensure consistency across every single deal. And to lock in everything, we led a certification program, a structured, measurable way to ensure that each rep could articulate our story clearly and confidently. And finally, like every good project, we needed to make sure we were measuring success, looking at both qualitative and quantitative measures from LMS completion to field readiness to make sure that we were measuring and actively improving and helping our teams grow. So each of these steps were critical in taking on this new brand strategy alignment from concept to execution in the field. This checklist here is going to be what drives our conversation today. So let's dive into it, starting with step 1, updating our sales collateral. Before we could even enable the team on messaging, we had to make sure we had a really strong foundation of collateral. This meant bringing every piece of collateral that was out there into one kind of work stream and workflow. We pulled in everything from product marketing, legacy decks that were still circulating, and most importantly, the ad hoc materials that our team was creating, all into one centralized location to just know what was circulating and what was out there. This central repository was allowing us to review all the materials that were being leveraged in customer-facing conversations. We noticed it really wasn't just the product marketing materials being used, but it was more so the latter 2 buckets that made up a majority of the conversational materials. So we wanted to analyze the gaps in what product marketing was putting out and begin patching those so that the team wasn't doing that. Then from there, before we even started organizing the content, we had to define what good looked like for the flow of the deck, what we wanted our team's flow to be in their conversations. And that meant setting clear rules around the structure, messaging, and purpose for these decks. First lesson learned here in transparency, this should have been step 1. But I needed to get my hands around all the assets before defining flow to know what was working and what wasn't working. Should we ever do this again? Or for anyone who can learn from my lessons, define the flow first so that you really can kind of funnel everything in. And step 3, which we'll get to in a second, will be a little bit more smooth. But we started by aligning on the format of the deck after, and we saw that there were parts of our story that remained consistent across all of the domains that we supported, or those personas. And we used that as a consistent theme across each of the decks. By the time the flow got to discovery, we recognized that there was a large product-specific component, as it naturally should have. So although the flow was similar from there, discovery, case studies, feature, value, and more, the actual content needed to differ greatly. And the product-specific messaging needed to differ as well, which we began to denote in this phase. For step 3, once we had the defined structure and we had centralized all those existing materials, our final step was to catalog everything and evaluate what we had. This meant doing a full review of what we had collated a few steps ago and putting it into the categories we defined. We actually gave everything in step 2 a classification system, making it easier. 1A, 1B, 1C, helping us kind of guide this and use these tags to help gear this process. We mapped everything to the latest product taxonomy, and that ensured that we were setting ourselves up for best practices. First, what we redid is we removed all of our outdated materials and flagged duplicates, kind of consolidating them if it fit our best practice, making sure that it was still serving purpose as well. For anything that was unclear or inconsistent, we either revisited it or we removed it entirely. The goal wasn't to sweep house, but it was to create confidence, leveraging what people already were using, along with what they had created and liked, to make sure we were building on something they felt comfortable with. By the end of this phase, we had created a set of collateral from our old materials that was up to date on message and partially ready for field use, but had to be patched with new messaging and next steps. So this gave a strong foundation to what we were building, making sure that we were helping sellers feel more prepared. But this wouldn't be successful without the next step. Once everything was organized, aligned, and evaluated, we had to move to the most critical and time-consuming phase of this sales collateral update, creating new standardized materials that reflected the story and fit into our definitions for what best practice looked like. We recognized that our goal was to build 3 foundational sales stacks across the different personas that would serve as a baseline for these pre-sales conversations. And this wasn't an aesthetic redesign. We were really trying to build and drive consistency in messaging and support, reinforcing the new taxonomy and equipping our sellers to communicate the value clearly, regardless of who the audience was within the domain. By grounding within our earlier 3 steps, collation, definition, and cataloging, we could ensure that what we had created was polished and purposeful for the use cases we were trying to drive. So the result here was a scalable content framework that allowed for easy updates, faster onboarding overall, stronger storytelling, and making sure that the entire sales team felt comfortable with this cycle. So with those 3 foundational decks created, our work didn't stop. It's still going on today. We moved into our evaluation phase, making sure everything remains relevant and responsive over time. In this phase, we address how the new content's performing day over day. We gather feedback directly from leadership and the commercial teams and tracked where reps still have to fill gaps or go off script because we didn't provide the materials that they need. This helps us identify content gaps and actually led to the creation of 2 supplemental decks as well to better support additional use cases. And as I mentioned, this is a living system, not a one and done project. So through iteration throughout the week, we constantly recap these little updates in a video that's released to the commercial team on Fridays so that everyone has visibility into what's changing and why it's changing. More importantly, in these videos too, we also share talk tracks and positioning to help with this quick and iterative enablement rather than, say, an end of month recap and meeting. So by the end of this phase, we had transformed all of our sales collateral from this scattered set of slides to a curated, aligned library of assets that really reflect our new narrative and actually work in the field. This was the foundation for next steps for our enablement journey, because the strong materials are only impactful when the team's equipped to use them consistently and confidently. Thus, our next step was shifting culture. The rebrand didn't land because of new slides or a CMS update, nor will it ever. It really requires that mindset shift. This means helping the team internalize what's changed, why it matters, and how to position it with confidence. So the goal here was really to ensure that we were making it feel less like a handoff from enablement, but more like a shared movement across the entire team as a whole. So how do you turn a rebrand into a movement? It's really partnering the company initiative with that of the team's buy-in. The company initiative, that's the strategy, vision, and materials that come out of that alignment and planning, which we talked about a few slides ago. But to get it right, you need the commercial buy-in, and that's the most critical, and if you ask me, the most challenging part, because you need to be intentional with those connection points. So that's what this entire phase for us was about. It wasn't automatic. It was something we had to build on. And we wanted to make sure the strategy wasn't just in the slides, but rather it was surfacing in each of these communications. So our mission was to guide that transition to create clarity and shared ownership overall. And I wanted to double click into this today because when you don't have buy-in, it really shows. And I wanted to highlight some of those impacts. You get mixed messaging, slower execution, and a lack of confidence in what's being sold, which negatively impacts the organization on an ARR perspective and also on an enablement and pre-sales perspective. Teams that operate in silos, that's going to lead to negative changes as you try to shift culture. Sales is going to say one thing, CS another, and marketing is going to try to catch up and lean on the messaging that they're hearing from their counterparts. However, when you have that buy-in, you can see a shift and that's in tandem with one another. The message is going to become unified. You're going to have reps speaking one message with clarity. You're going to have your CS team speaking the same message to support adoption. And the offerings that you bring to market are going to go to market faster and stronger. So you'll see more engaged participation in trainings. And ultimately, that's going to have a direct impact on your customer base as well. So for us, knowing this, our North Star was simple. We wanted to move the initiative from an announcement to that shared ownership that we just discussed. And we needed to figure out how to actually make that happen. So for us, we took 4 deliberate steps. The first step in this was hosting an Ask Me Anything session, which was actually critical for this entire initiative. This is where enablement was able to answer questions in real time and provide space for transparency. This showed that it wasn't a top-down push of messaging, but rather it was an open dialogue that helped us understand the concerns the team was having as they heard about this material and make sure that we can address those concerns before we even dove into anything enablement related. Selfishly too, this allowed us to understand what we actually needed to build to support the team. It was allowing us to understand the internal support and collateral that would be needed. And from this session, it actually helped drive 2 of the materials that we created. The second step in this was running a leadership training session. This made sure we had a clear cascade plan so managers could reinforce their messages with their teams. Step 3 has a lot more on this, so I'm not going to dive into that now. Then from there, we baked updates into our commercial rhythm that we had already. We already had an established bi-weekly commercial call, so we added a standing topic in that call. In this, we provided updates on our enablement process and the progress towards our official launch date. This was an opportunity for the cross team to discuss their anticipated challenges, gaps that they felt still existed, and just any open floor components that they had. And the final step in this was embracing iteration. As the product offering evolved, our content and approach needed to as well, and we needed to be very communicative in that. So every resource we created was not static. They moved with the business and we communicated to the team as that was occurring, so they felt comfortable that we were supporting them through this change. This wasn't something, and this is something we continue. It wasn't just something that happened then. We still update those documents so that they're going to a place they feel comfortable with and know it will always be updated. So the combination in transparency, leadership, reinforcement, and responsiveness really allowed us to turn this alignment into action. With the culture shift and buy-in in motion, we'd done the hard work of laying that foundational base. Teams weren't just aware of the new direction we were going in, they were starting to feel a sense of ownership, which allowed us to build on that momentum. But buy-in doesn't drive execution. We had to equip the team with the knowledge and the tools to talk about these changes in a confident means. And that meant hands-on training for this new product alignment. And not just what changed or where product sits where, it really mattered how they positioned it for this conversation. And we wanted to make sure this wasn't just enablement led. We wanted this to be reinforced by leadership, step 2 in the prior process, so that they can see it was a company priority and not just something we were all trying to check off a list. Part of this tied closely with our pricing, step number 4. Now that we had new packaging, new personas, and new value stories, it meant that sales ops and commercial needed to lock arms in how we priced, making sure that we were leaning on team best practice in conversations and training on real scenarios. So for the next section, we're actually going to couple step 3 and 4, talking about how we enabled the team to drive that clarity and consistency. We followed a standardized model for this training. So to support this rollout of new product alignment and pricing, we took a tiered training approach to make sure every team member, whether you're a manager or an individual contributor, were prepared and confident to speak the same language in regards to the product alignment. We actually started this with our leadership training. These were the enablement-led sessions focused on the material at hand, which we'll get into in the next slide. This ensured that leaders understood each of the components to the fullest degree and could champion this material for their team as well as support them down the line. From there came the IC training, which actually was not enablement-led. This is where leadership cascaded the training we supported them with down to their teams. And this was intentionally designed by 2 different touch points. The first touch point was actually across all of sales. The head of sales would relay the material to all ICs. And then from there, step 2, managers did the same. This 2-time repetition from leadership ensured that the team was receiving all of the information from the people they report to and that lead them. The sales leader training were much more lecture-like, think about it, slide-based and less conversational. And then from there, the manager-led trainings were far more conversational and open floor. This gave people a space to ask questions, explore real-life scenarios, and begin practicing this personalization of messaging across their team style. And then from there, we buttoned everything up and reinforced this process through our LMS system. We didn't just centralize all of our resources there, but we actually reinforced each of the different trainings with an LMS training, or a test, I should say, to find strategic and tactical questions, making sure that the learning was repeatable, accessible, and trackable. And that training still lives in LMS should anyone want to refresh. This combination we found of live, team-led, and self-serve ensured that we weren't just announcing a change, but we were embracing it into our daily practice and meeting the team where they like to receive their learning. This training structure of the flow of the 3 different tiers actually applied across 3 different topics, so we did it 3 times through. We began by laying the foundation with our product-specific training. This was an opportunity for us to align on the structure and purpose behind each of the products. In this training, we walked through each product line, what was included, what was excluded, why those choices were made from a product perspective as well. And this wasn't just a list of features. We actually emphasized the strategy behind this because that directly impacts the positioning to our products in the market. Our team also needed to be equipped to speak not only to the functionality of each SKU, but also the value proposition, most importantly. And this had to relate to each customer persona. So we spent a lot of time unpacking how each SKU solves a specific set of problems and where it differentiates from previous offerings or even our competition as well. And by the end of these sessions, our reps were clearer in understanding the full product lineup and how to confidently connect those points to real customer needs. Our second training introduced the how. So our first was the what, our second, the how. This phase was about transforming product knowledge into those real world conversations we'd be having with our customers. The collateral we spoke about, tailored by persona and mapped to new products narrative, now had to be shared to the team. We had paired these materials with updated talk tracks, helping our reps understand what to say, when to say it, and how to adapt their message to be flexible depending on whom they were speaking to. The idea for this was to ensure that regardless of the entry point, whether it was an inbound request, a discovery call, or a follow-up conversation with an already existing client, that every seller was equipped and aligned with the messaging and confidence to carry this new persona messaging forward. And focusing on these common scenarios made sure that we were driving consistency in how we showed up in the field. And as I mentioned, this includes our pricing as well. With products and messaging solidified, we turned our attention towards the pricing end, because a strong pitch only falls flat if the pricing conversation feels disconnected or confusing. Our sales ops team really took the reins here. They built training around our updated pricing model to ensure that everyone was aligned in regards to these new levers. They introduced new simplified structures that mapped clearly to our SKUs and the customer segments we were supporting. This also provided a centralized resource for the team that could reinforce this easily. This gave sellers the clarity during one of the most high-stakes parts of their conversations in the sales process, and also drove consistency, making sure that regardless of who the customer was speaking to, one rep to another, they wouldn't hear a different story as it related to pricing. So in short, it gave our team the tools to close deals faster and navigate pricing objections. So with our product deeply understood and our messaging aligned, pricing rolled out, it was now time to build that knowledge foundation that the team needed. And this, from an enablement perspective, to me is the most exciting part. The knowledge alone isn't the end goal. It's the consistency in the application, making sure the team is coached to grow in those conversations, which is why our next step focused on certification. We didn't just want the team to have the material at hand. We needed to make sure they could use it in their real scenarios and feel good about it. So this focus shifted from training to validation. Were our sellers confident? Could they articulate these new slides and value prop under pressure? And did their messaging reflect what we built? All of that was coupled into the next step, where we brought it all together through certification and standardization across the team. As we mentioned, this step was about ensuring consistency through this certification process. But we couldn't just jump directly into testing. We knew that we had to lay the groundwork to be successful. And success here would require structure, preparation, and a lot of support from our leaders. So we broke this into 4 phases. The first was manager alignment, then from there, team preparation and certification. Additionally, we had planned out what reevaluation would look like only if needed. Each of these phases played a critical role in creating accountability across the team while also supporting learning and growth in a healthy way. And most importantly, this allowed us to standardize our expectations across the entirety of the sales organization without making it feel like a top-down mandate. So let's talk about how we brought it to life. Before we could certify, we had to lay that groundwork, as I mentioned, and that came from that leadership alignment. That in and of itself had a series of challenges which we had to navigate. The first challenge in this was actually the first certification tied directly to this strategy. That meant everything had to be crisp, intentional, and scalable, so we set everyone off on the right foot. Secondly, and this is a lesson learned here, it was our first time enablement led a certification end to end. In hindsight, we probably should have evaluated some of these challenges in advance, but we needed to make sure that we were supporting our counterparts. So this strategic training needed to function really strongly because it was our first, especially recognizing that we were supporting managers with many competing priorities. And that leads to our third challenge, our manager accountability. Our managers are great at holding our team accountable, so we needed them in the loop, thus their availability. Even with full support, their bandwidth is incredibly limited. So we had to get creative in how we looped our managers in without adding too much to their plate overall. So that meant structuring the training in a way that made it easy for them that they can support and reinforce this with their teams. So while this wasn't plug and play from the get-go, it was an important step to creating that shared accountability and responsibility. And our goal overall was clear across enablement and pre-sales. By the end of this certification, every team member needed to be able to speak about the product alignment across key scenarios, regardless of what their role is or their level of experience, which meant we needed to create consistency in messaging and how the team understood our positioning, thus how they could explain it and tailor it to different customer conversations. We also knew that success wasn't just about content comprehension. So part of our goal was driving real-world usage of the tools and resources we had built, making sure that they were actively being used. And to ensure that consistency and accountability, we aligned on a 45-minute live certification session that was co-led by managers and enablement, allowing for us to create space for coaching and reinforcement while also setting a really clear bar for what good looked like. Every team member was evaluated using the same 9-scenario framework, focused on real-world conversations. And this wasn't just to check the box. We determined that every team member needed to score at least 80% to pass, and their video had to be uploaded into our LMS to track completion, helping us raise the bar and giving us confidence that the team could represent the new messaging. And we knew that we had to reinforce this with real-world scenarios to reflect what reps were actually seeing in the field. So, along with our managers, we carefully selected 9 key scenarios that would span a majority of prospect conversations. Handfuls of topics that would remain consistent across domains were prioritized. Elevator pitch, company origin, problems we solve, our data value and differentiation. But we didn't overload this with product-heavy questions. We prioritized that alignment component and messaging shifts overall, making sure that we were then building on the training the team had. And this was intentional. It was directly tied to our earlier sales collateral training, which you can see here. That second training then helped establish these key narratives, and the team was able to build upon this, creating consistency and through line in our enablement and helping close that loop of strategy to execution. And then from there came team preparedness. To make this successful, we couldn't just put on a surprise certification on calendars, especially since it was around the holiday season. We had to build this foundation, starting with awareness. We actually let people know about this in the Ask Me Anything session we talked about a little bit before, and we followed up in those biweekly team meetings. And here we were signaling early that enablement wasn't just changing materials, but we were raising the bar as a group on readiness. And then came notification. We gave everyone a full 3 weeks notice, especially again, since it was around holiday time, outlining exactly what the 9 scenarios would be. No surprises. They had full preparation, setting clear expectations and giving managers time to plan with their teams as well. Meaning that then we could focus on alignment. Enablement made ourselves available across biweekly one-on-ones, weekly office hours, and the offer for ad hoc touchpoints whenever a team member needed it to answer questions and clarify any potential gray areas. The goal here was to remove any friction or concerns that the team might have, making the reps feel supported and not blindsided by this. And finally, we encouraged practice. What we did is we actually gave team members the chance to submit recordings through online scenarios in our LMS where they could actually get feedback before the session, before their official evaluation. So we turned it into iterative processes and something less imitating. And in staging it this way, we shifted from like a certification that was supported with readiness. And it was designed to be structured and supportive and standardized. Every team member had the same opportunity to succeed and improve. These 45-minute sessions were led by enablement, co-joint with our managers and sales leadership, all on the invite so that there was visibility into the process. Each session was recorded, not just for compliance, but also for review, making sure we had a coaching asset overall. And then from there, the scenarios, as I mentioned, were all the same, outlining the same scenarios for each individual. After the session, we provided real-time feedback and scored across a standardized rubric, providing the score in real time. making sure that we were giving detailed guidance to each user and working through opportunities to tighten or evaluate delivery. As mentioned, once complete, everything was uploaded into LMS for tracking as well. And it didn't stop here. This was an ongoing plan. Certification now became a repeatable process that we had steps to iterate on and not just a one-time initiative. It's now baked into how we train, reinforce, and scale each and every process. Should be noted that not everyone passed on the first try, and that's perfectly okay. This was a safe space for people to grow and practice their positioning. So we needed to make sure that we had a process in place. For those that did not score 80%, they had a clear process in place. We provided in-person and written feedback, so reps had clarity on what they needed to improve upon, and that followed up with individualized one-on-one coaching sessions to unpack and evaluate their opportunities in a safe and constructive way. This continued process was then supported through open office hours, and the rep actually got their original recording to self-reflect as well. Reevaluation calls were scheduled 1 week later for the same participants, creating that consistency and measurability. And we provided weekly status updates to the leadership team as a whole so that they had progress and could step in if need be. And once the rep passed, all videos were uploaded into LMS. Within no time, 100% of the team was certified in full with impressive scores, showing that the clear expectations really empowered our reps to improve. Then from there, with certification complete and full confidence that every team member could speak to the value and positioning, we had to measure success, because without measurement, enablement would just be emotion. So in doing so, we wanted to make sure that we had a continuous loop of execution, feedback, and iteration. So with that, we focused tracking impact right away. And we looked at 6 key indicators. The first being utilization of content. Were teams using the resources we created? And if not, why was that? Making sure that we were doing our own discovery internally. Was it a discoverability issue? Was something missing? Or did we need to reinforce the why? Then from there, we had a number of new resources being created prior to this process, and we needed to measure that delta. How much was still being created? We wanted to make sure this wasn't falling on our reps, but it was led by enablement. So as the core resources went out, we wanted to continue measuring what the reps were creating and making sure that that number decreased overall. Our third metric is actually something our LMS provides, but it's searches that return 0 results. We use this as a leading indicator of our unmet needs. If team members were searching for something and coming up empty, that told us where we needed to fill gaps. Then from there, we looked at deal velocity. We wanted to see if our new messaging and confidence would allow us to create momentum. And I will say it's a little bit early to recognize just the impact here, but we have anecdotal wins and baselines to compare against. And that goes similarly with close one. We're looking to see if this alignment and consistency in pitches does help deals across the finish line. But we still need a few more weeks and we hit Q2 to really see that impact. And the final metric's qualitative, but this is the number of questions we're getting per week. Fewer questions over time as it relates to this material shows us that the training stuck and the team feels confident. We are very welcoming in questions and we want these questions to come to us, but we also want to see that they start to develop into new realms, and we use those to see where clarity might be needed as well. So the biggest takeaway here for us was measuring success, not as a wrap-up activity, but as an ongoing iterative process. And that brought us to the end of our pre-sales enablement journey, at least as it relates to our checklist on paper. We aligned on content, shifted the mindset, and trained on new products and pricing, making sure that this wrapped up with certification as well. Each of our steps was intentional, and we wanted to make sure that we were able to check every box. That said, though, while the commercial team had to be incredibly prepared for this change, so did the other team members across the organization. That led to challenges. We had product names that were changing, positioning that was different and more, and we wanted to make sure that they were aware of this too. Although that wasn't our main focus, we wanted to loop that in to ensure that our cross-functional partners were able to generate this awareness and had knowledge of these changes as well. So we did that through a variety of ways. The first and most visible impact was through our website. Our website's not just to align our clients, but we used it as a resource internally for our organization as well. Our refreshed website was required as we made this change, and it was a great way to support our team. This was a foundational tool that aligned internal teams as well, helping them tell the clearer story with product suite alignment, more unified messaging that was consistent, and additional client success highlights. Additionally, as part of our broader team enablement as well, we made sure to extend this message in our January 2025 town hall, highlighting the why and the product alignment. And this deep dive allowed us to educate the team, provide high-level insights, and share where they could go for more information should they wish to learn more. We knew we wanted to drive that consistent adoption, and this allowed us as a key moment to reinforce this alignment and create company-wide alignment. And then from there, we held a targeted Q&A session similar to the Ask Me Anything for non-commercial team members. We started by collecting questions in advance, and then from there, we answered those and also did a true live demo so that they can see that alignment. And to make it stick, we distributed the deck, provided the recordings, and gave additional access materials, making sure that we weren't just answering questions, but reinforcing that alignment for all team members to speak confidently. So as we close out today's conversation, I want to take a step back and reflect on what this journey represented for us. It wasn't just a tactical shift. It really was the opportunity to realign our team, our processes, and our product story to one unified vision. And we needed that cross-functional partnership as well. So I reiterated the checklist here. We added step number 7 at the back end. While we discussed the 6 key steps for the commercial team, we truly need that 7th step included in our checklist because it doesn't just stop at sales. We need to extend this across the organization, making sure that everyone is set up for success. So thank you everyone for spending time. Let's dive into questions. We have a little bit of time, and I'd be happy to kick it off.
Awesome. Samantha, we have a question from Katie M.
Awesome.
She said, how do you manage coordination with marketing on documentation, especially branding, something that's traditional, always sat and been owned by marketing? Sales enablement is just over a year old at our growing org, so this is still relatively new.
Similar in that vein, Katie, you're not alone there. And that was difficult. What we actually did is, because this was a key initiative, we got approval from marketing to kind of take a first pass with the templates they provided us. So our amazing marketing team actually gave us templates from the old product marketing materials they were using and said, like, hey, give this a go, and then we'll iterate from there. I'll be the first on this call to admit my design is not nearly as good as any marketers could be. So I gave it like 100% in the messaging, call it 25% in the branding. And we created a marketing plan to enhance those slides. So we went to market with what they brought up to call it the 75%. And that 25% gap in the branding, they're actually working on, and that's some of the materials that we release every week. I recognize that this will not be possible for every organization, but having that template allowed us to kind of take a big step forward and meet marketing a little bit in the middle. That said, for initiatives we've done in the past, not this, but where we needed to partner, having a meeting, like a design-specific meeting on the books, is key so that you can whiteboard the need and marketing can enhance it with beautification, because that really is a gap. Design takes a lot of time, rightfully so. The creative process is not a quick one. And you want to make sure that you're able to create an action plan with a timeline, like a project plan, and follow up on it weekly.
Love it. I had a question as you were going through this process. How long did the full 7 steps take from when you started to when it ended?
So we kicked this off back end of October, and launch was the beginning of January. So it was a really quick process because we also have holiday season in there. You have Thanksgiving. That took us out for about a week because we wanted to be mindful. We also have company shutdown, and no one wants to do trainings like the Friday before that. So block out a few weeks there. It definitely required all hands on deck, but it was a really quick few weeks if you think about it.
That is incredible. Well, this has been a masterclass on change management. I think I screenshot almost every one of your slides, so I'm going to need your deck because there's so many of these things that apply to what we're trying to do on the CS side. And I love that seventh section, right? It doesn't end with the sales team. You've got to make sure that the enablement side, the operation side, is all on board and saying the same messaging, which is huge.
No doubt. No doubt.
Okay, well, with that, if there's not any additional questions, I'll jump on the screen share here and we'll do a last little cleanup here. All right. Okay, so as I mentioned, just an incredible session. Thank you so much, Samantha. It truly was a masterclass on how someone can drive change management within an organization. And so this will be a session I need all of my leaders to be watching as well. With that, please feel free to reach out to Samantha as well. Her contact information will be in the profile. So if you have other additional questions, make sure to reach out there. I do want to call out, you can stop by our expo hall to visit our premier partners who have gone above and beyond to make sure that they contribute to the success of this event for all of you. Don't forget to check out the raffle giveaway. The information on how to enter, as well as the live leaderboard, can be found pinned at the top of the public chat, as well as in the docs tab. And I need to make sure that I call out here, we're so excited to continue to bring DEMOFEST on the road in DEMOFEST X. We had a great time in San Francisco in February, and we cannot wait to bring this event to you all in New York City and London again later this year. You can register to join at demofest.com or head to the link in the docs tab as well. And thank you so much for joining this session. Thank you again for the awesome insights, Samantha. Up on the screen are the next upcoming sessions. You'll automatically be pushed to the next session if you're in your specific track, but you can always switch between tracks by going to the agenda tab at the top of the left. So thank you again. Appreciate the time, and we'll see you in the next session.